Hello everyone, welcome to this new Arturia live stream. My name is Martin, I'm Senior Product Manager at Arturia. I'm in charge for the fuse range and the FX collection range. So welcome tonight, I hope you are all well and fine and in good health. Today we're going to talk about FX Collection 2 that we released 1 week ago. So FX Collection is a series of 22 top-notch effect plugins. So this includes preamps, filters, reverbs, delays, and compressors. And in FX Collection 2, we are adding this time 4 new modulation effects and 3 new bus enhancer. So the 4 modulation effects, so 2 choruses, 1 flanger, 1 fader, we released them individually back in September and around Christmas time. So I will go quickly over them at the end of the stream. Right now and for today, I really want to focus on the 3 new effects that we are releasing this month. These are an EQ, so EQ Diode-609. There's a stereo compressor, the Diode-609, and a bus processor, which is named Bus Force. Well, let's start with that. We'll start with EQ Diode-609. So this is a very careful recreation of modules that were part of a broadcast console in the 60s in Germany. I would say a good description of those will be like the Neve from Germany. They have this unique, fine analog grain, very low noise. These are super easy to use. You'll see it's not, complex unit. So let's look a bit more on this. So this is a stereo version. We included the 295 module, which is 1 low shelf, 1 band filter, and 1 high shelf. To this, we added a low pass and a high pass filter, which were also part of the same broadcast console in different modules. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. The shelf has 3 frequency positions for the high and low. It's 3 dB steps, the bell from 300 Hz to 8 kHz. What's interesting is because this broadcast console at the time were really aimed as doing mostly voices, be it for radio or for television. So the frequency of this bell and its name presence is really for capturing the vocal presence. It's really good at that. You'll see that a little bit later on. So it's interesting because I think with this type of EQ, you can't go wrong. It's so straightforward in a way, and that makes the beauty of it. It's the sound is really, again, very low distortion. A little remark is that when we analyzed the original vintage model, we were really surprised by the ultra low distortion of the original, even if they were 50 years old. And that was quite an achievement, in terms of analog audio. Beside that, what we added, you can see on the right part, we added a few functions. I'm going to go quickly through it. So we have MS capability mid-side. So it means instead of, in a stereo version like this, instead of going, processing left and right, you can process mid signal, which is the mono part of the signal, and the side, which is, the signal on the side, using this mid-side processing. I won't go too deeper on that. I think if you can go on our website, we have tutorial about that. It's really useful when you get a stereo signal and you want to equalize not something that's specific left or right, but something, for example, that is at the center, for example, a snare drum within a drum bus. Auto gain is super cool as well because it's when you activate it, it kind of tries to compensate the loudness of the signal. So if you add curves to the signal, you keep like a perceived level which is constant. And link, just to link the 2 channels together. And range, I'm going to show it just afterward. I was as character. Let's try a quick sample here, which is basically, all right, small track. just on this track, what I'm going to do is just to add little, you know, smiley curve to it. So a little bit of high end and low end, and maybe with the presence, just try to dig in a little bit more elements to it. So actually, I didn't show you. There's a visualizer, so you can see what's going on. So here, I'm just adding a bit of bass. I'm going to be a bit more, let's be a bit heavy-handed. I'm going to show you something interesting about it. Right. So again, you see 3 dB step control. What we did is like we kept the original step control, because for me, it's really about the unit itself. It's like, you know, chung chung, you know, just two notch and you're on it. You're not really, it's not a unit where you go, you know, half a dB there, half a dB there, or, you know, change the Q. You just go really broadly. It's like a broad paintbrush to apply to a signal. But because of its analog nature, it's really interesting the tone it will bring to any type of track. So here I have been a bit heavy-handed, and that's where we implemented the range function here. So range function was actually inspired by what you can find on API, some of the API hardware equalizer, where it's a coefficient that you multiply to all the gain frequencies. So if you look at it, when I'm applying, I'm reducing like the range of the total AQ applied. So that's super cool. If I get out of step control, I can even go a bit more, you know, precise. So if I go back to my AQ here, I'm gonna reduce it to something that is probably more adapted. All right, just a little bit of shine. Okay, cool. That's just a quick example to show you this EQ is perfect for little, you know, shiny EQ, just little paintbrush touch to it. And the range function is really interesting just to adjust it if you'll be a bit heavy-handed. The character here, this sample won't really do justice to it. What happened is when we did the model of the original 295, we found, you know, in the really little details of the sound, like the sound of the transformer and the circuitry, all this is adding little analog detail to it. And we found interesting to provide a little bit alternate version from the original one. So you get the proper model really to really small details of the original character of the unit. But then we played around a little bit with, for example, the transformer response, and especially in the low end, the amount, a little bit of the distortion in the low end also. So this is an alternate model that provide that. So I encourage you to try. On some sources, maybe it will be really subtle. On others, it will be more, you know, you'll say, oh, I prefer that one. There's no good or bad option, I would say. It's just different touch to it, a different flavor. Okay. That's about it. Let's try on a second samples. I was talking about voices. So here is like a small vocal samples. Right. So this one, you know, it's t'entends pas ce que j'ai joué? You don't hear me? Let's play again. Oh, hold on. I was muted here. Wrong track. Sorry about that. I guess you can hear it now. Right. Okay, sorry for this little technical thing. So this little voice sample, we're going to listen to without the AQ. Without the AQ. Winter is gone. Right, it's quite heavily processed already, but what I want to show you, demonstrate here, is using the presence. I'm gonna lighten up a little bit the low end. It's a bit heavy for this type of voice, for me. And use the presence just to catch up a bit more breath, because you'll see that's what really works to me on this EQ. I walk in the sun, winter is gone, so far away. I walk in the sun, winter is gone. So without it and without.
so far away.
And that's what actually I really like with these Citrol modules, is you can be quite heavy-handed, but it's never harsh. It's always in a kind of, you know, I don't know exactly why. It's to me, it's also the magic of analog for that. Is you, and at the time, I think with the 3 dB step you had on these units, you could, you know, go +9, +12 on kind of EQ that on a digital version of it, I would probably be going, you know, 1, 2 dB, or be much more conscious about the values I'm applying. And here I'm just, you know, pushing the knobs until it's sounding good. So I find it quite interesting in that prospect. And again, with the range here, it was, you know, you can use it just to bring down a little bit, well, you just down to reach something that if you've been a bit too heavy-handed, you can bring it down like this. So full blast.
Winter is gone.
Let's
I
listen to
walk in the sun. Winter is gone, so far away.
Okay, so that was just 2 quick examples for a very simple but efficient EQ. I really encourage you to try it, you know, little touch of it on various tracks within a mix or on your bus. It will work, you know, perfectly well. Now I'm going to focus on our next plugin that we're adding on the FX Collection 2, which is the Diode-609. So seeing it, you will recognize it. It's one of the most famous stereo compressor ever made. It's modeled after a Neve 33609 version C. So for people who know about it, there's been many versions over time since early 80s until now, which is still manufactured in various versions. So version C was not the first version, but one of the earliest versions. And this unit that we sourced in the UK, we actually modded the input transformer to use very original one, the Mariner one. It's using diodes as at the core of the gain reduction. So compressor reduce dynamic, okay? I won't go too in the compression 101, but this particular compressor used diodes as a way to reduce the gain and to compress the signal. And it provides really specific quality to it. So and at the time when the first diode compressor were invented, like in the 60s, they realized that it was bringing a faster attack time or response than, for example, opto compressor, and also bringing far less distortion than, let's say, FET compressor like the 1176. So it was a new way to provide compression. It's been intensively used in the broadcast domain as well as a, you know, peak limiter, and also in music for sure. What I really like with that one is the harmonic content that the diode provides to your signal. So it's not only about gain reduction and, you know, keeping the dynamic of your signal under control. It's about enriching your signal with this, you know, harmonic content is because of the diode, which is the core of it. Okay. And the only drawback on the original was that it's quite noisy, and you needed very perfectly matched diode for each channel to sound right. Let's have a look at it. So we have for each, so this is a stereo version of it, and the Diode-609, like the original version, has on each channel a compressor and a limiter. For the people knowing will say, hey, what's up, what's going on here? It's like the other way around. Normally it's true. On the original model, the limiter is on the left and the compressor is on the right. Well, we decided to put it the other way around because, you know, for just the sake of understanding the signal flow. Maybe, you know, some purists will say, okay, that's not the real one, but really it's just about the graphical interface. I for me, it makes more sense to show things in the right order, if I say. But anyway, the compressor is fairly classical: threshold, attack, recovery time. You got a makeup gain and a ratio. Bypass for each module. And then on the limiter, you have a threshold, recovery, the release time, and 2 position, attack time, and bypass. Now, you may also notice something which is really different from the original, is the attack time on the compressor. The original version, and even up to the more modern version of the hardware, only have 1 or 2 position attack time. And on the C version that we model, it's only 1 position. And this attack time on the original is really fast. It's about between 2 and maybe 5 milliseconds or so. So it makes it a really snappy, which is the beauty of it in a certain way. It's the character of the compressor with this very fast attack time. But we wanted to give it maybe a broader use. So we implemented this variable attack time. So you get the fixed position, which is the original as we measured it on the C version. And then above it, we can slow down the attack time and make it really useful, I feel, for bus processing. I'll quickly go also on some of the additional features we have. So you get digital visualization here, link and link of the parameters. The compressor can act as a dual mono, so each channel are processed independently from one another. And we also implemented, same as for the AQ, the mid-side mode. So I'll show you just in an example later how useful it can be. And dry-wet, okay? Let's listen to the first example on this one. So I'm going to bypass it. Let's listen to this short extract here. Right, so quite good recorded drum loop. What I want to try is to illustrate a bit the character of this diode compressor. Okay, so I'm going to squash it a little bit. I'm going to over compress it. But as you can see, we have this dry wet capability. So what I'm going to do is compress the signal quite heavily and then introduce this compressed signal, mix it with the original signal. So just adding this layer of compressed signal to the original. And this combined with the harmonic content that this compressor is providing is something pretty cool. So what I'm going to do, maybe just put 100% wet. I'm keeping the fixed original attack time from the compressor. I actually going to bypass for the moment the limiter. I'm using recovering time. That's something I didn't mention. The original A1, A2 recovery time that you'll find on the original, which are time which is program dependent. So on the transient, it's very fast attack, or maybe like 50, 100 milliseconds. And the more the sustain is keeping, the signal stay at a high level sustain, then the release will grow. So it makes it something really natural and musical, because on a short transient, the release is quite fast, but if the sustain is quite long, the release is slower and making more musical recovery or release time. Let's listen to that with just the compressor in as it is. So you can see I put a little makeup just to bring back the level to compensate for the gain reduction. It's smoothing the transient very well. I really like it. It's smooth. Then I'm going to add the limiter to it with a very fast recovery. That's going to be really snappy, fast attack, so it's kind of not forgiving on the remaining transient that I have after the compressor. Remember, limiter is after the compressor, okay, as on the original. So let's try now. I'm going to insert the limiter on it. So without, right. I love it. super cool. So this is a bit like heavy-handed, okay, again. So now the good thing is I'm gonna start from my dry signal, non-processed signal. I'm gonna add this heavy processed, compressed and limited signal back into the mix, and you're gonna see how it adds up to the original nicely, bring this kind of density. So that's basically my dry signal. I'm bringing back bits. I think something like this. That's the dry. So that's with. So what we achieve here is really that the ambience, the density of the resonance behind, like the liveness of the drum kit is nicely emphasized. That's something I really like. Let's try on another example here. And this one, I'm gonna expose the advanced panel. So that's something you probably know, sorry, if you already have some FX plugin from Arturia that we most of the time have an advanced panel. The goal is to enhance the original, that if you take this original recreation and you put it in a DAW environment, then it deserves to be kind of augmented. It doesn't make sense to keep some limitation, to me at least, to keep some limitation of the hardware where you're in the DAW environment in digital. That being said, we try not to add anything to it. It's not because we could do everything that we're going to do it. And in this case, for example, we decided only to play around the sidechain signal. So the sidechain signal is the signal which is triggering the compression. Okay, that's the thing that triggers the gain reduction in the compressor. Usually, in most cases, it's the same signal that you want to compress. So the signal you want to compress trigger the compression. But you can also use an external source, like I'm compressing a bass, I'm compressing a bass, and I want the kick drum to trigger the compression on the bass. So in that case, you will select external sidechain here to do so. And this sidechain signal, it's really interesting to tailor it, to limit it, or just to emphasize certain zone of it. So the compressor will overreact to a certain part of the signal. Basically, what I have done here is I apply an EQ on my sidechain signal. Again, that's not the signal I'm hearing, that's the signal that is triggering the compression. And I did roughly, I cut the low end with a high pass, I bring down a little bit the high end, and an emphasis like, about 2K region. So what I'm trying to achieve here is kind of emphasize the snare drum. What I'm going to do is to try to, in this drum loop again, to reduce the amount of snare drum within the loop. The snare drum is mixed with all the other elements of the drum, so I'm going to need to use mid-side processing as well to do so. So here is how I'm going to do it. Is I'm going to be in mid-side processing, and I'm going to only process the mono part of the signal, which is where the snare drum is. On the side, I have mostly the toms, I've got the cymbals. So I'm going to focus only on the central part of my signal. And because I apply this EQ, I'm not going to react too much on the kick drum or even the hi-hat. I'm only mostly focusing on the snare. So let's listen to it with this EQ and the mid side. I have on my mid channel bring down the threshold. Again, I'm using the original attack time and 2:1 ratio. I'm not using the limiter on that one. Let's have a look. So you can see that my compressor is mostly reacting to the snare. it's not reacting to the kick, it's not reacting to the rest of the drum kit. Let's listen without it. I forgot to listen to the original one. So you can hear it's nice drum loop, nice drum track. But again, I felt that the snare is a little bit in your face in a way. So hear it again. This time I'm trying only to focus on the snare drum here. Yeah, a little bit more. So let's listen again without, and I'm going to switch with. So without, with. Without. So you can hear that the snare is subtle, but it's kind of backing off a little bit. So that's typically just an example. Maybe it's heavy-handed, maybe it's not the best example for that, but I think it's interesting to notice how you can use both the sidechain EQ with the mid-side processing to go precisely, tweaking something which is already mixed, like a drum bus, for example. Let's try another example I have here. This one. Let's listen to the track first. Right, so this one, I just wanted to try be heavy-handed and see how it works. Again, I'm just using the sidechain EQ just to not having the compression overreacting to the kick drum, which is quite, present, and it's good. So I don't want to, to compress it in a way. I want to try to avoid over compressing it. I'm adding a bit look ahead. I didn't mention that, but look ahead is the ability also to look ahead the incoming signal to be more to anticipate the transients that are arriving to the compressor. So if you look a bit ahead of the signal, then transients are arriving, and the compressor can better process this transient and compress it. Let's listen to it without and with. Gonna adjust. Adjust a little bit. Just the makeup gain a little bit, so we keep as the same level. So that's like a quick example of how cool this compressor is, just bringing things in your face very naturally. There's nothing complex about it, I just keep, I reduce a bit the attack time, going quite heavy on the limiter with slow attack, so there's still some transient going out. And what I just want to show on this one is also what we added here, which is named input drive. So imagine this knob as a way to calibrate your unit. So this is an analog, the original is analog unit you used back in the days, or in any analog studio actually. It's still the case. You need to align your equipment, so like a 0 view meter, reference level is well preserved along the signal chain. And in a DAW it's completely different, because everyone is kind of messing around the levels as well. You don't have much, you have much less reference, I would say, of how you record in your DAW. And also the electronic of the original, depending if you were really pushing the level high and reaching the highest part of what the unit was able to cope with sound slightly different. So with input drive, you can drive the electronics of the unit more, and by doing so, you will adding more harmonic content. So I'm going to show you, and I hope you will hear it. It's really subtle. It's really adding this little richness to the sound, because we're driving the component, the diodes, or the digital model of these more with this knob. So let's try it. Okay, I'm going back down. So I don't know if you can hear it over the stream, but for me, I'm like eating a little bit, like erasing a little bit the transient of the signal. So if that's something you're looking for, that's a good way to do it. It's really a nice way to emphasize the character of the original diode compressor. Okay, I think I've done a good tour on this one. By the way, if you have any question, comments, suggestion, please fill in the chat near the video stream. At the end of the show, I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. Okay, so now I'm really happy to present you Bus Force, which is here. All right, so Bus Force is our Arturia original bus processor. It has quite a story, because when we started thinking about this product, there were two main factors and on the first thinking about it. The first one was my old history as sound engineer, like years ago, reading Tape Ops magazine about Michael Brower. I don't know if you knew that guy. He's a fantastic sound engineer, mixer. He did Coldplay, many others. And he was really open about his techniques. And one of his techniques which really marked me was parallel processing. At the time, it was really, was the first, I think, to openly share that with everyone. And it really inspired me. And what he does is he uses different buses with different processing on each buses, and he will feed like a source simultaneously to different buses with different processing, or individually. Sometimes only source will go to one bus, sometimes will go to different buses. And he creates this layer. So if you have like a fast compressor, a slow compressor, like a distortion box or a different EQ, this mix will, create this really organic sound, which is so much more rich and musical that, like, for example, a single compressor master, I mean, you probably need one, but this ability to mix this different processing together from a single source was really interesting. And the second inspiration is from a current unit, which is the overstayer modular channel. Maybe some of you already recognize that some of the features are coming from that. We really have I own a unit, I love this thing. It's a fantastic hardware unit. And thinking both approach, we wanted to create something for bus processing that was, a take on that concept. So we are using, in this single plugin, you have actually 3 processing paths. So these are the one here, which are named dry pass, comp pass, and sat pass. And we have 4 modules, processing modules, that we're gonna insert on the different paths. So we can't do every combination possible. We had to limit a bit. So there is 36 combination possible. Like you have 36 different routing, which are represented here. So in the current one, for example, I'm having the EQ on the dry pass, I'm having the compressor only on the comp pass, and I'm having the saturation module on the sat pass, and the input of the saturation module is actually the output of the compressor. Okay, but I could remove that and take directly, for example, the signal from the input, or take the signal from the output of the EQ. Okay, you get it. I think it's fairly straightforward. And we're gonna mix these 3 processing paths together to create this parallel processing technique. The modules we have are, so we got 1 equalizer, 1 filter, 1 compressor, and 1 saturation. That's the same type of module you will find on the overstayer, but we wanted to do our take on it. So we kind of we worked on our own design for each of these modules. So I guess maybe let's have a listen to this first example as it is right now, and then I dig further in each of the modules, okay? So on this example here, let's listen to the original track. So again, drum bass, because it's good sounding drum track, straightforward, okay? Now with what we're trying to do here is we're gonna work on the parallel processing. So again, a bit like I did with the Neve, I'm gonna do the same here by mixing this dry signal that we just heard with some quite heavily compressed signal and also a bit of saturated signal. And just here is the result, and then I dig and we disconstruct this. Without. I love it. I think it's really bringing, you know, it's bringing life to it. It's almost like if I added some room mics, or if I added some, you know, ambience to it, or doing gate techniques. It's just actually mixing these three different, you know, taking the source and applying different processing to it and mixing them back together. So this is how we did it. So you have, for each pass, you have a mute and an output volume. These are the output volume for each pass. So on the dry pass, I only apply a bit of equalizer. So this equalizer, we wanted to have something simple, not chirurgical. I think for this type of tool, that's not, you know, but something really musical. And so we implemented, I would say, Pultec style. So for those who are aware of the Pultec EQ, that these are the most famous EQ ever made, I think. And they have this two things. The first is like a very nice tube saturation to it, and also this specific curve and this ability to do some, at the same frequency, do a boost and a cut simultaneously. And this results in some strange but really musical EQ curve. So on this, we didn't focus on the saturation bit because we have our saturation modules coming afterwards, but we focused on these EQ curve, which are inspired by Pultec. So if we have two shelf, one low shelf, high shelf, and a band here, and the Pultec style shelf are here. So if I'm like pushing here, you will see that while I'm pushing the frequency above the, you know, my cutoff frequency, simultaneously it's cutting some gain right under it. And the more I'm adding gain on the shelf part, the more I'm cutting just below the cutoff frequency. And this is because of the curve. So you can see I can have, in that case, really broad, typical shelf EQ. But with this curve parameter, I can dig into it. If I go to the maximum, it's really digging here. And that's what happened when you have this cut and boost on the original Pultec, and you do both cut and boost at the same time. You have the almost the same exact, you know, result than that. So we didn't implement it cut and boost simultaneously, but we have this curve function. This actually was defined by a guy named Michael Gerson, who studied the Pultec and came up with this model for recreating this Pultec curves. Musically, this is super interesting because you are boosting part of the signal, like your high end here, and you're kind of cleaning what's just behind it. So it requires less equalization in a way, because you're both cleaning and emphasizing some part of the signal, which make it super easy to use and really musical, I think. And so we have that also on the high shelf, low shelf. If we listen to it, just, so I've been heavy and dead here, but if I play with curve, let's just only have this shelf. listen again. So you can hear I'm cleaning a little bit what's going on just under the so if we listen, all right, so this is much, it's heavy equalization. It's just to demonstrate it. So that's the equalizer. So we have this on the dry pass. We have, I'll mention the filter in another sample just after. Right now I'm going to focus on the compressor. So if I'm listening only to the compass, maybe I get back to my EQ here. Yeah, I didn't, by the way, I didn't mention any of the function from the toolbars. We have super cool tutorial online. We have in-app tutorial as well if you want any information, you know, tutorial here. You get in-app tutorial inside the plugin, which is great. And Brian and Jakub, our main marketing guys, did some super a tutorial on every function. So please do not hesitate if you need additional information. So the compressor. It was a bit of a challenge as well. We wanted to offer the compressor which will bring the widest variety of sound and use that we could imagine. You know, be it really gentle bus compression, really smooth, or something more crazy, like when we don't want to do parallel processing, we can accept doing crazy compression because we're just going to add a little amount to the dry signal. So the overstayer was a great inspiration for that. We kind of went our different way as well. So what we did, and this is really specific to this compressor, and it's quite unique, I think. Maybe there's also a manufacturer, hardware or software that does it. I don't know them, but actually if you have reference, I will be happy to know them. But what we did is a dual detection pass. So to put it simply, we take the incoming signal, the sidechain signal that I explained before, and we analyze it in two different ways. One is using RMS. So we kind of take the RMS value of the signal. So it's kind of mellow. It's the average value of the signal. And one is really peak detection, and we're using attack and release time to define that, as we did on the previous compressor, and as you can see here. What's really unique to this compressor is the more you increase the ratio, the more we go from RMS detection to peak detection. So if you are at low ratio, you have this smooth response. And if you increase ratio to go to higher gain reduction, then it can get much more snappy. And you tend to more consider the peak value attack and release peak measurement. So that's something, I mean, quite original. And the second thing, which was inspired by the overstayer actually, was the ratio capability. So we can go from really low ratio, like 1.1, to infinite ratio. So that's a brick wall limiter. And we can go beyond. And that's where the fun starts. We go into negative ratio. And if you look at the curve here, when I'm increasing the ratio, okay, here I'm about brick wall limiter. You can see it here. And then I go in negative ratio. It means that the louder the signal is, the more it gets reduced. So it's not only a brick wall limiter, like the ceiling I cannot exceed. It's that with negative ratio, the more I go over, the input signal go over the threshold, the more it gets squashed down. And you can see that with the curve here. So that's really interesting. In fact, I really invite you to try on any rhythmic track, because it gives you the ability to just mess around your rhythmic, you know, just change the groove totally. So let's go back to what we had here on my little example with just the compressor, listening only to the compressor part. So no compression, threshold maximum. I always put a smile on my face because that's fairly insane compression, right? So you can really go crazy like this. This I have negative ratio here. So we name force these parameters because it's a combination of ratio and changing the detection from RMS to peak detection. So that's the force, Arturia force parameter. And so by doing so, you know, we get this crazy result. And what I'm going to do now is using this parallel processing ability to mix this completely squash signal with really slow attack, you know, 5 milliseconds and 1 millisecond release time. I'm going to mix it to the dry signal, and you're going to see how it reacts. So I start from, you know, no signal, no compressed signal at all, and I'm going to slowly raise this level here just to have a listen. So that's basically my signal with the equalizer. Now I'm going to raise compressed signal into the mix. That's the original signal with the EQ. So get the attack much more lively. So that's pretty good. Let's keep it like that for now. So that's already a nice result, and you can see it's a quick setup, you know, it's by no way mixing, but it's just to showcase the ability of the unit. But now I'm gonna showcase what the saturation pass does. So remember, we take the signal at the output of the compressor and we go into the saturation module, which is here. So saturation modules, we have 4 flavors of saturation. We have 3 harmonics generations, so even, odd things. So for even harmonics, odd harmonics, and thick is a kind of mix we did of both, nice mix of both. And you can adjust this by raising, you know, it's a kind of a threshold, and it's gain compensated, so you're adding harmonics to the signal. The fourth mode is overdrive. So this is basically a crazy overdrive gain. You go into it as much as you want, and you have a makeup gain just to compensate, because this is not gain compensated. We couldn't do it because depending on the amount of overdrive, the gain compensation doesn't work anymore if the signal is too much clipped. And you'll see we can really crap up the signal. The last parameter interesting here is curve. So we realized that if we were going into this heavy saturation module with a full spectrum signal, most of the energy is in the low end frequency, so we'll tend to really saturate the low end before starting saturating the high end frequency, because there's much more energy in the low end. So what curve does is a kind of pre-emphasis and post-de-emphasis at the output of the module. So we kind of attenuate the low frequency before going into the saturation module. And at the output, we apply the exact invert tilt, or, you know, it's kind of light tilt or shelf equalizer at the output of it. So the result is that the saturation is more applied on the medium and high end than on the low end, or at least it's more balanced. You can deactivate that if you want to go straight into it and try. You'll see the difference on that. So that's the saturation module. Let's listen to what it brings when I'm taking the signal from outside the compressor and going into this saturation module. So here is without. I'm going to push this. So basically that's my compressed, over compressed signal. And now I'm going to turn down the saturation. Listen again. It's much more, you can see the effect of both overdrive. So I'm raising this a little bit less. And let's listen just to the curve here, what it does. It's interesting. That's with the curve. So you can see, so without curve, the low end gets saturated much more, and you don't have that much distortion on the medium high. So that's where curve is really handy, I find, when you have this large spectrum signal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this down. Okay, I'm going to open up the previous 2 pass. I'm going to slowly bring in the saturation here. So first, actually, the dry signal. There's a compressor. Now I'm going to add the saturation slowly. That's not too bad. So just check the level with the original signal. This is bypass, and the result now. I can compensate just to keep. So you see the character, full character this can bring. This is just a first example of what you can do with burst force. Let's try another one, because there's many ways to show this. The other one is here. I'm going to use only the compressor and the dry pass. So let's listen just to the. Well produced, you know, already well mixed. What I want to achieve here is bring a bit more density or thickness to the low end, you know, and I'm gonna go a bit over the top just so you can see. And this is where also the filter is gonna be really handy for that, combined with the parallel processing. So let's cut this for a moment. What I did here is just, I cut down a little bit on the dry signal, the low end, with a, you know, just a bit of shelf. So that's what we have. Okay, just doing a bit of cleanup. And the low end, actually, I'm going to bring it back through the compass here. Okay, so let's listen, and I'm going to bypass the compressor, just look at what I did with the filter, which is basically take everything out of the signal and just keep the low end. All right. Okay, and now adding the compressor to that. So you can see I'm going in the filter. What we're listening here is filtered then into the compressor. Basically, I'm in a brick wall limiter. The attack is quite slow, and here I'm looking for the release time that make it more jumpy. So, and because we can allow, you know, very fast release time, it's quite easy to increase a little bit the boost, the groove of it. Yeah, I hope it makes sense for you guys. Here, it's really, you can see in this area that the groove is getting more jumpy. So what I'm going to do now is mix that with the original signal, which was slightly filtered. So I'm getting this back down. And I'm going to bring this up. So you can hear, listen again, hear difference between bypass and with this two-pass parallel processing applied. Right, so now adding saturation. So again, I'm taking the signal at the output of the compressor. So we have the filter going to compressor, then to the saturation. Let's listen what it does. Bring it up. It's bringing slightly more harmonic content. So maybe we can try just to have this. Okay. Another example, I can see time is running, so I'm trying to go faster maybe. This one, super interesting as well, which is going to be much more crazy using the clipper. I didn't talk about the clipper. So this is like heavy processed, I think it's pigment bass track. And using again the same parallel processing, going quite heavy on the distortion here. Let's listen just with the compressor. Much more in your face. And now I'm adding the saturation here. That's where you can this. Here we go. So I think this is a good example. Last one on bus force here, using this example for a trap track, which I have like this. Right, so what I'm going to do, this one, I'm really going to go mad on the low end, you know, trying to get that humph, messing around also a bit with the saturation, but this time it's mostly about messing around with the filters. Let's listen. So here is the original signal. I took off a bit of the low end again, and I'm adding the compressed and filtered signal to it. Maybe it's a bit too much, but it's nice. Right, and then a bit of saturation. Let's listen to it. So this time I'm taking the signal just at the output of the EQ, going into the saturation. So let's listen to it. So this time I'm gentle, kind of erasing a little bit the attack on the high end and bringing, what I want to do is to bring a bit more, you know, thickness to the hi-hat and the snare. So let's listen. I'm going to bring it up with the 2 other pass. Maybe a bit too much bass here. Is out. Changing the groove, it's changing the balance, it's changing the thickness of the whole. So that's burst force, and I'm super proud of this product. I think it's our first homemade compressor in a way, and the DSP team, notably Kevin and Clément, they did like a fantastic job on this. As well on the saturation, I mean, the whole team, Fanny as well on the saturation, Alessandro on the EQ and the filter. It's really a team process, this bus force, and you should check it out. It's worth a try, definitely. I probably over time, I wanted just to go very quickly on the modulation here. We had, where is my first one here? Yeah, here we go. Just wanted to remind you that in FX Collection 2, we are adding this 3/4 modulation effect. These are super cool. These are probably, to me, and using a lot of modulation, and my colleagues here at Arturia using also a lot of modulation. I think these are among the best of the analog modulation, you know, made it as plugin. It's, you know, flanger, chorus, phaser. These are all staple plugins. You have some in every DAW for free. But this one has this unique BBD, you know, flavor. So we recreated all this BBD analog sampling that you have, so the bucket brigade techniques that are inside this original, and we push it really to the limit of, you know, what we could do as a emulation or recreation. So just listen quickly. Maybe if I'm short on time, I'll go directly of this one. Which is a simple pad. I think it's from Pigments. as well, or the OBXA maybe. And super nice analog sound, the original one from the V collection. I love it. Oops, sorry, that's the next one. But this original track, you can already feel, you know, this analog feel to it. What I'm gonna do with this one is adding this little flanging effect, and because we have this function generator, I won't go into all details of this, but you'll see the movement I'm introducing because of the flanger. So you can see the function generator cycling through it. And that's the beauty of the BL20, is that you can combine 3 sources of modulation together. So it's actually parallel processing for modulation in a way. You get the manual modulation, which can be modulated by the function generator. You get envelope follower, which was part of the original Bell flanger. And you have the auto, which is a LFO. And you combine these 3 together to create this weird movement, 3-level movement in a way. Let's listen again. All right, a quick view at the phaser, maybe this one, which is also so this is from the Neutron biphase. Again, this is not around BBD, it's around the Vactrol chips. Probably was one of the most difficult recreation we ever made in the FX collection, because this was really tricky to recreate precisely. It has so much imperfection that it's was really, really difficult for the DSP, the digital signal processing team. But they manage it. I don't know how, but they manage it. And we added this envelope follower here, and you're going to hear the effect of the envelope follower, which takes the incoming signal, and this envelope follower modulates the rate of the phaser, you know, the sweep generator here. Let's listen to it. So without. Right, now with. So you can see the rate is modulated by volume of the incoming signal. I love it. It's really, I can listen to this also in different way, more classical flanger style. But again, it's just a phaser, you know. It's in a way, it's basic processing when you think about it. But these one are not basic. This one are really recreating one of the best analog modulation effect ever made, and it's the sum of all this imperfection and this analog glitches and this noise and this, like, if you having a sine wave modulation, it's not exactly a sine wave, because when it's done in analog, it's not exactly a perfect sine. So, you know, all these little defects that make it really sounding interesting to me. It's original. Classical phaser pedal, but with all the, you know, distortion inherent to it. It was a try again. And to end it, I think, oh yeah, just quick view on the Juno chorus. Again, simple chorus from the Juno, the famous synth that we released in December. Easy plugin, you know, 3 button. We added a manual mode. Just take any track through it. It's sounding great. And I want to end this demonstration with one of the effects from the FX collection, which is one of my preferred. I love it so much, and I wanted to share it with you again. let's take a bigger view of this one. It's our spring reverb. So this is a recreation of the Grampian 636 reverb. It's a really elusive reverb. Maybe not all of you know about it. Basically, it was the reverb of choice for Lee Scratch Perry, for example. It has this unique germanium preamp that we took great care to recreate. And we added different tanks. So you got the Gibbs, original Gibbs tank that was in the unit we modeled. We also sourced a different one, Gibbs, that was in another unit. And then we added different tanks variations. So you get this really precise recreation of this mythical reverb, I would say. And plus all the ability with also pre-delay, pre-filter, post-equalizer, and the ability to blend between the preamp and the output of the tank. Just listen to it. That's my little, just to end this short demonstration. It's one of my, preferred plugin, I must say. Right, so that's without it, and with it. You can even kick it. So yeah, that's it. I really like this one because the germanium preamp can really bring any such a strong character to any source. I really invite you to try it on various sources, even on drums, on vocals, and plus this mono. You can have this mono, really vintage and with a lot of character mono spring reverb. So that's great. All right, I can see time is passing. I hope I haven't been too long. I hope you enjoy this short demonstration. So FX Collection 2 is out now. You get a huge promotion until June 25th. I invite you to check on our website, on your Arturia account if you're already an Arturia user. And now, well, if you have any question or any suggestion, comments, maybe you put into the chat. I'm gonna check and try to answer them right now. So let's have a look. Okay, so question 1, wondering if Arturia can glue together all the FX collection into a complete channel strip form. Nice question. I would love to do it. The question for me will be at what CPU expense. As you can see, most of our plugin, we really go deep into the analog recreation. So we need to find a way, but it's actually, it's a very good question and something we'll be wondering for a moment now, for sure. Are you guys planning to release the plugin in a way we can access them in one plugin like you did with Instrument in Analog Lab? Interesting. Well, it's not planned yet, but I think it's kind of the same question than before. It's worth digging that. Actually, Analog Lab became really a strong product for us, and I think for everyone who want to discover synths, you know, who doesn't have a strong, like me, I don't have such a strong culture in synths, and I love Analog Lab to the ability to discover new sounds and music era, and it will make totally sense for the FX. But right now, I don't know how I would make that, but it's a good question. Is this a plugin you would use for mastering? I've been using it on individual track, haha. Yeah, if we're talking about Buzz Force, which I guess is what it's about, I'm not so sure. Actually, Clément, which is one of our product manager here and did most of the fine tuning of BuzzForce, is a mastering engineer. So he will be good to answer that. My feeling is that with the Pultec style EQ and the nice low ratio RMS style compressor, it's worth a try. I wouldn't call that mastering though. Mastering for me is different, job. But as a like on your master bus, definitely, and any submix bus, definitely. We have one of our good friend Emre, who's a great sound engineer in London. He's been beta testing BuzzForce, and the first use he really got hold of, and he's keep using it since, is on vocals. I didn't illustrate that, but actually this BuzzForce channel strip is great on vocals because you get all this parallel processing is good. You want to tame the vocal, keep the dynamic, but at the same time keep a bit of the live take, mix both together, add a bit of very harmonic content just to enrich it. So I would strongly advise you to try on vocals and any individual tracks. I must say it's a bit same like me, and it's true for I would say almost the FX collection effects. These are for mixing, so if you put your mixing hat, you can use it while mixing. But actually these are also good tools, like the modulation we just seen, BuzzForce, great tool for production. So if you want to bring new life to a track or enrich something, bring movement, change the groove of a track, for example, with BuzzForce, these are great plugins to use on individual track for sure. If you guys came out with a soft clipper, it will be game changing. Probably on BuzzForce, I guess. Yes, that's probably a good idea to keep on a V2 if we make one day. I agree. It was always a balance of the amount of feature we would put in it. BuzzForce is already not complex, but you need to apprehend it, and at some point we were careful not to add too many things. I mean, we had question about MS processing or bringing more type of modules, and the soft clipper was also in the discussion, but we didn't put it this time. But why not? Yeah, for sure. Thank you for this wonderful effect. Any way to get them directly in the FX chain of the V called synths? Well, the good thing, it's already the case to some extent. With V Collection 8, some of the effects on the instrument are from the FX collection. I can't remember exactly on which one, but for example, some of the choruses or the flanger or the phaser actually from the Bytron, it has two phasing modules. When one of them was implemented in some of the instruments. So it's actually one reason we went into effect is also a way to improve the V collection instrument by providing all the FX chain around them. So some of them are already into the latest V collection. I try to use reverb, but it always ends up dirtying the end product. Any tip? Well, I guess it's difficult to answer this question. I would probably recommend trying two things. The first is really use the filter. So on all three reverbs, we have pre or post, or sometimes both, filters on the output of the reverb. And this is super useful just to get rid of the low end, because most of the time we kind of let the whole signal, even the vocals, the low end of a vocal in a reverb can really get things muddy. So a first tip, if I can say one, will be to be careful with the filter and use them, and do not hesitate to cut quite a lot. On the spring reverb, I don't know if you saw it, but I was also or was it? Yeah, possibly using a filter at the input of it. The other way I would recommend maybe is to try the pre-delay. So pre-delay enables you just to separate a bit the reverberated signal from the dry signal. And if you find the right, combine with the tempo and find the right value of pre-delay, it can help, not messing too much, not blurring too much your track. That's there's no true tip for every case, for sure. How do you folks integrate modern features into modeled gear? All the features analog modeled as well, or some hybrid signal chain? Well, there's no true, one answer for that. It really depends. Basically, if we do a recreation, we're gonna really try our best to do the most accurate recreation possible, given that we don't want also to be too much CPU intensive. So it's always a balance between the precision of the model, of the complexity of the model, and the CPU we want to take from the computer. And because sometimes, you're ready as a user to spend a lot of CPU on a big reverb, but be less ready to lose a lot of CPU on a single compressor, for example. So yeah, we have this analog model, and then yeah, we can add, we try to be faithful or to keep the spirit of the original. I don't know if that answers your question, but mostly we wouldn't add new features that are that counters the spirit of the original. For me, that's one of the most important things, because in digital domain, we could imagine doing anything. And there's great plugins that can do anything. And when we do intensity reverb, which is a digital reverb we created ourselves, we allow ourselves to do whatever we want. But when we do recreation of an analog gear, we're gonna add advanced feature or additional feature that are in the spirit of the original. There's no way to, for me, it will be silly and a bit sad actually to lose the spirit and the interaction of the original one because we add too many stuff. So features analog model as well. Yes, we try to, everything that is in the original, we model it. And if we add some other stuff, it depends. We can add additional features that are also analog based, or we can add digital feature that we add to that. I don't know if I understand properly your question, but that's what I can say right now. Does Arturia have SSL emulation plugins? More broadly, actually, if you have like suggestion of what we should do as a next step, go for it into the chat. Go for it, just a quick email to our support team at support@arturia.com. I'm really happy to get suggestion. Right now, we don't have SSL emulation plugins. Yeah, so that's what I can answer. But that's good. It's really good to me to have suggestion like this. With the FX collection, the goal is to create this, this like virtual studio for you guys. So any suggestion is welcome. Would Arturia ever consider doing hardware effects? No, I would love doing hardware effects. The good question for me will be, would they be analog or digital, like DSP based or purely analog? The guys who did the Polybrute, they have this expertise in analog. We have the DSP guys for doing digital. I don't know. We talk about it. We never made a decision about it. Again, if you have suggestions, product ideas, I'll be really happy to hear from you. Is FX Collection to M1 compatible? It's in the process of being natively. Right now, we are working on Big Sur and M1. Are we using the native capability right now? I think it's, for the moment, it's the same as the V collection. It's difficult for me to do an official statement because it's ongoing work, but we're working on it. That's what I can say. It's working fine on M1 computer, but I'm not sure yet we are using the native capability. Or maybe ask our support team to drop a little message at the end of the chat, maybe tomorrow, to give a up-to-date status on this. These 3 edition graphics collection, widely chosen, super smart program, but what counts the most, they sound epic. Thank you, much appreciated. We had great fun doing them, and that's it. Thank you very much. I think that's the last question or last comment. Thank you guys for attending, staying that long. It was a pleasure to present this new product to you. And I hope you have a great evening, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.